Hello, and welcome to the Meat Institute's webinar, Foreign Material in Food, 2025 Benchmarking Findings and Industry Insights. I'm Casey Gallimore, Senior Director of Regulatory Policy here at the Meat Institute, and I'll be moderating today's webinar. We're looking forward to a really great discussion today on a topic that I know is top of mind for many of our members. But first, let's cover a couple logistics. And I'd like to thank FlexRay for being our sponsor on this webinar. We really appreciate their support in bringing this topic to the Meat Institute members. If you don't know FlexRay, they are known as a trusted partner to the meat industry in safeguarding product integrity and consumer safety. They use advanced X-ray and CT inspection services to help meat processors detect contaminants, ensuring USDA compliance and minimizing costly recalls. By recovering usable product and protecting brand reputation, FlexRay keeps meat production efficient, compliant, and trusted. And we have a couple speakers from FlexRay that I'd like to introduce, Kurt Westmoreland and Kai Luker. Kurt is the Chief Commercial Officer for FlexRay and has more than 35 years of experience in food safety. His early career focused on analytical testing with Silicur and evolved into sales and commercial operations executive with Mary NutraSciences. Throughout his career, Kurt has been an active member in several industry associations, such as the Meat Institute, as well as IFT, IAFP, AFI, all kinds of others. Kai serves as the Chief Product Officer at FlexRay, where he leads the development of the company's innovative X-ray inspection processes and technology. So he understands how these things work way more than I do. With over 2 decades of experience in the service of CPG, food, and beverage industries, Kai brings a wealth of knowledge into quality assurance relations to this role. So I'll toss it over to start with you, Kurt.
All right, great. Thanks, Casey. So what we'd like to do is talk a little bit about the results that we found through a benchmark study that we recently conducted. And we did one of these last year as well. And we'll speak a little bit to some of the synergies that we saw from last year to this year. This was the second time that we've done it, our second annual survey, really in food and CPG, and we narrowed it down to that. We had responses from over 160 folks, typically in food safety and quality assurance, and it's across a wide range of industries, not just meat. And really, what we're trying to accomplish, when we do these studies, is to provide you guys in the industry with a really deep understanding of what's going on in terms of foreign material challenges and what you're facing and how we might address those. And the goal here is to, continue to provide you this information so that you can look at how you might manage solve foreign material incidents and how we can step in and help you do that. So the first thing we're going to do is talk about the frequency of what the industry is seeing in terms of foreign material challenges. And then we'll talk a little bit more about the sources of where some of those foreign materials are coming from. So that'll be the first section of the webinar here. So we're going to start out with a poll here, and if you guys would, respond to this, on average, how often do you have foreign material contamination events, in your facility, specifically into your facility? So if you go ahead and get started there. All right, so let's move on to the next slide here and see how some of those results, and you'll see those when we do the final follow-up of this, how those results actually pertain to what we're seeing in the marketplace. So interesting when you take a look here, specifically pay attention there to weekly and monthly in terms of the number of challenges, because I think you'll see a lot of correlation as to what we saw here, across the larger industry study that we did. Okay. All right, so this is what I was referring to when we're talking about the frequency. When you take a look at this, and we asked the exact same question there, what we saw is that 73% of the respondents in this year's benchmark indicated that they encounter some type of foreign material incident multiple times a year, whether it's weekly, quarterly, or monthly. And again, this is somewhat consistent with what we've seen in the past, and we'll share some of that information, going forward. But the other thing is when you look at it, when you're combining the numbers between weekly and monthly, nearly half of the respondents have indicated there's some type of foreign material event that's having to be dealt with on a monthly basis. So, foreign materials is something that you guys know is a challenge in the marketplace. When we look at what goes in the marketplace in terms of of recalls. Typically, foreign material falls somewhere around number three in the recall list of challenges that food safety faces, and these results would support that being consistent with what's going on in the marketplace.
So as we work through some of the data that we were provided during the benchmark here, what really is noteworthy is there was around a third of the respondents that showed a decrease year over year in foreign material incidents. And as we continue to work through this from an industry perspective, we would definitely like to see a much larger percentage of that, an increase or staying the same year over year with over 50% of the respondents. Um, we felt that was a little alarming to say the least there as we look through this data. And then, of course, from a source perspective, equipment failure continues to be the number one issue as it relates to foreign material. And we've seen this multiple times as we've done this data analysis. Equipment and supplier and ingredients being number one and number two, they're obviously reducible. They're very difficult to fully prevent. But there's lots of progress for equipment as it relates to how we handle things in a food facility, whether that's continuous improvement tools or preventive maintenance tools, things like that, to analyze exactly how we can approach equipment failure. There's a lot of work that occurs there. I think the bigger struggle here, and Kurt's going to tie this in here in just a moment, is that the same approach to suppliers and ingredients, we're not there. We haven't reached that maturity the same way that we have the way we handle our own manufacturing processes at a site.
So as we think about this, when you look at what's going on, in terms of the process and what's happening, and it's like Kai referred to, when you look at the combination of what's going on from a supplier and ingredient inputs, as well as what's coming on, into the process, really from natural sources and organic materials and whatnot, when you put all those things together, the supply chain really is the largest reported source of foreign material. Not just one part of it, but multiple parts of the supply chain. And so what do you do? How do you take a look at this and how do you address it? One of the ways is obviously utilizing third-party auditing services. And most all of you guys in some shape, form, or fashion do that, whether through some type of a GFSI audit. Developing supplier monitoring programs that really would include foreign material specifications. And we're going to spend a little bit more time speaking specifically to that because we know that there are those programs that exist out there that are a bit more specific to other areas of food safety around microbiological and chemical concerns, and how maybe we could look at building foreign material into some of those same type of supplier programs. Auditing supplier ingredients as part of the process. Again, working with suppliers to develop standards around foreign materials and how those are addressed. And then doing some surveillance and or validation programs around the incoming raw materials from suppliers, especially if they're suppliers that you've had known challenges with. So let's speak a bit more to the supplier monitoring program and what it's all about. When you look at the supplier monitoring program, from a compliance standpoint, really what you're looking at is, how do you verify that, the supply or the ingredients that you're getting are in compliance with what your product specifications are. But the first piece of that is, do you have defined product specifications around foreign materials? And it could be the presence or absence of foreign materials, or it could be specifications for how foreign materials are being monitored and what you're doing, but there's different ways to build that in. But the first thing is, how's it built into the program? From a compliance standpoint, you're really trying to prevent really any unsafe products from being used, downstream as you continue to monitor, or excuse me, as you continue to manufacture product, and obviously keeping it out of commerce. And really, you're looking to make sure that what you're getting, what you're buying, is meeting the food safety standards, that you're expecting, so that you can then produce the correct or safe product for your consumer. We're looking at building in accountability. Supplier accountability is key. There used to be a person in the industry I work with very closely, and she said, "You get what you inspect, not what you expect." And one of the things there that I think we need to think about there is, from a foreign material standpoint, what kind of evaluation are we doing, or what are we looking at in terms of requirements for the suppliers? And how do you look at this in terms of what it does with the suppliers? And really, when you look at these type of programs and you build different parameters into your supplier programs, It's not a punitive type measurement. They're there to help you build relationships, strategic relationships with your suppliers, so that you're in a point where you can have open and honest conversation around what might be going on from a foreign material standpoint, and really helping your suppliers in some cases understand what might be happening that they're not aware of. So it helps them with their capability and knowledge of what's going on in their own process. And then how do we build an improvement? And obviously, what you're looking at doing from your perspective, as an end user, is looking at developing or doing a better job of supply chain management. If you are a supplier, which a lot of you guys in the meat industry will be, how do you work with your customers, to help them improve the relationship with you, and how do you provide them a safer product? Really improving sustainability and preventing product waste. That's one of the keys to the type of work that we do. And I know it's extremely important to many of you guys, because I've had these conversations with you, is how do you keep from putting product in landfill? And one of the things to think about is when we do work with our customers, in general, and this is a very general statement, about 98% of what we inspect goes back into commerce. So we're only pulling out about 2% of the product, i.e. the stuff that may have a foreign material in it. So, when you're thinking in terms of a lot of projects, that we do might include 500,000 to 1,000,000 pounds of product, and you're able to, save 98% of that. That's a heck of a lot of product that's staying in commerce versus going to the landfill, i.e. reducing the product waste. At the end of the day, when you look at these supplier programs, you put supplier programs in place, it's all about continual improvement, and not just for you guys as a supplier or you guys as an end user. It's about improvement all the way through the supply chain. So detection prevention practices, this we're going to turn this over to Kai and let him kind of get through this, because this is where we really get into the nuts and bolts of what's going on with the process.
Yeah, absolutely. From a survey standpoint, over 70% of the respondents were still using more traditional equipment, traditional technology, metal detector, X-ray, and obviously there's some mechanical equipment from sorting and sifting that continues to be used as well. We still haven't seen a large uptick yet in some of the optical sorting equipment as it relates to what's available in the marketplace, whether that's hyperspectral or traditional RGB imaging technology. And then a microwave technology is definitely has an exciting future as it relates to detecting some things that traditional equipment can't find, but the adoption rate across the industry as a whole right now remains rather low at this point in time. So just to dive a little bit deeper as it relates to X-ray technology, obviously that dominates the market, and there has been a marked shift away from metal detection overall. Metal detection continues to shine as it relates to aluminum in particular, but X-ray can really outperform metal detection really in every single way now, especially with modern detection technology like photon counting technology or dual energy. Those types of things have really improved the opportunity to find foreign objects with X-ray technology. I mentioned some of the vision systems that are available in the marketplace, in particular hyperspectral imaging, which can find a large degree of foreign objects that X-ray and metal detection lack. So in a robust sense, a multi-pronged approach as it relates to foreign material really is going to be the wave of the future as it relates to being able to detect soft plastics and wood, which neither X-ray or metal detection can find, and then using X-ray and or metal detection in combination in order to find a lot of other things that that you can't find with the vision system as well. One of the limitations with those vision systems, unfortunately, though, is that it does not do subsurface detection yet at this point in time. We're still a few years away from being able to add that to the repertoire for inline inspection. So as we continue the theme of the survey results, the confidence in the equipment overall continues to lack. And this is not new. We've seen this year over year as it relates to this. And especially as we relate to moving away from metal detection and onto other technologies, we just don't have the ability to maintain and keep up technical skills in-house the way that we did, over the course of the better part of 20 or 30 years in the industry, where we were familiar with metal detectors. We knew how to calibrate, set up, dial in recipes at the plant level for changeovers, those types of things. Now we're relying on vendors to come in and provide that support because of the complexity. And you add in things like AI and robust algorithm approaches to a lot of this technology. We really have to rely, unfortunately, on our vendors here. So although the usage of other technologies is improving, the confidence that we have in these in-house isn't where it needs to be yet. And then we'll do another poll here quickly about detection equipment or just the methodology for detection in a plant. So this is very much in line with the overall industry results here as we close this poll and move into the actual results from the larger group. So employee reporting, virtually half of the responses, in a larger sample size are employee reporting. And I think that there's really a catch-22 about that. I think there's something positive to be said about a strong culture of quality within the facility, having people that are vigilant about their eye for foreign material or issues that can arise that could create foreign material. There's also something that could be potentially concerning about that we're still relying on, our employees from a human being perspective to be the proper signal from foreign material as well. And then, of course, the next largest sample here, automated detection equipment, that does fall in line with our year-over-year results as it relates to that, with the rest of these opportunities for discovery being much lower in nature. Kurt, I'll pass it back to you.
Okay. Yeah, and as you see there from the data, there's really no one size fits all as to what the best approach is to prevent foreign material. You have to look at this thing from multiple different perspectives and how it's going to be addressed either internally or externally. And it's like Kai mentioned, right now, while there's good equipment out there and there's good tools that can be utilized, the confidence in how to utilize these tools and taking advantage of the tools is not as high as it needs to be, and it's really due to the knowledge gaps around the technology and what's out there. And Kai alluded to that a little bit. It's not as simple as just plugging it in and letting it go. And it'd be nice if it was, because it'd be a whole lot easier for folks. But at the end of the day, there's calibration checks that have to be done. Calibrations have to be done on multiple different types of foreign materials. How's the calibration adjusted? What does it mean when something gets out of calibration? What does it mean when something's going on with the machine, and calling on the vendor? So inline machines, great. They serve their purpose, and something that we feel like that is something the industry needs in support of X-rays along with metal detectors. But we also feel like there's obviously a reason and a need that third-party services exist to help with these type things, and it really is to be a true subject matter expert on what's going on in terms of foreign material detection and capabilities that are out there, and really resolution when something occurs. How do we help you guys get through a situation? How's your third party help you get through a situation so that you do keep product in commerce, as we talked about a bit earlier? So what is the mitigation response? How do we take care of this? This is where we get into some of the nuts and bolts of the process.
So the first
when you
part of
think-
this is evaluating exactly who in the plant is making those decisions. From my experience, just being in the plant for over a decade, this falls really in line with that. The local decision making really is the majority of what's going on. And as an industry, not just from a meat perspective, but in the food industry as a whole, there really is a lot of autonomy that goes on as it relates to hold release decisions that are being made at the plant. And for larger holds, larger decisions, obviously that's going to get pushed up to corporate or the director level or above as it relates to hold release decisions. Operations still plays a key role, obviously, at the plant level. Plant managers and operations managers, maintenance managers, they're all very important as it relates to this. But at the end of the day, the keeper of this still is in the hands of QA authority.
Yeah, and one thing before we move on off this slide here, Casey, and to support what Kai is saying is, in terms of working with the industry and working with customers to work through challenges or work through projects when things occur, what we have found is it's really important, up front and early on during the episodic event, let's say, that any and all areas of the company that are going to be involved in the decision-making process, that we get everybody aligned early in the process. Because, the last thing you want is for one department to feel like we're going to move forward, and then it goes into another conversation, and then we got another department that's not sure about it, and all of a sudden you've got a potential project where you've got product on hold for several days that's delayed due to some of these, back and forth internal discussions. So if we can get all the decision makers, all the players involved early on, it helps us help you guys to get the project moving forward, much quicker. So when we think about this, we got another polling question here is, when you've got some type of event, what is the most common action that your facility takes, when you're dealing with a product that is on hold for foreign material? So again, single choice, we'll give you a few seconds to go through this. And again, we're very consistent with what we're seeing across the market study that we've done. So it's good to see this consistency, because it shows us that what we're learning from the marketplace is consistent with what you guys are seeing as well. So let's move to the next slide, and we'll talk a bit more about it. So when you look at what's going on in terms of the most common actions taken, again, you saw it on the information you just sent across right there. Nearly a third of the respondents noted that they use inline equipment to re-inspect after a foreign material event. And that's something that we see, and we often talk to customers about in the marketplace. So it's the data that we got from the market is also what we see on a day-to-day basis in terms of what we're doing. Then after that, whether it's utilizing inline equipment or reworking product, one of the things that we still see in the marketplace, and obviously it's something that none of us want to see, especially you guys that are manufacturing product, is end up landfilling product, because it is somewhat of a common outcome that still occurs. If you look over there in terms of the number of respondents as to what we saw is going on in the marketplace, it's still a pretty common occurrence as to what's going on. And, our goal is to work with you guys to prevent that from happening, because we know you guys don't want to be putting product into the landfill. Kai, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the reliance on in-house re-inspection, it seems to make the most sense at times. There are ways that we're still using that tool from an industry perspective that it's not necessarily conducive to creating a better data set for us overall, whatever we're analyzing, what we need to from a hold release inspection standpoint. So if we were to take and reevaluate that product on the same technology that we did to re-inspect it, obviously we're just repurposing that same equipment, and we're recreating the same inspection parameters that we've already executed the first time that we manufactured that product. And we're not gaining any depth or layers to that. And at the end of the day, the equipment itself isn't meant to be a measuring device or an inspection tool. An inline metal detector, inline X-ray, is essentially an alarm to let us know whenever some conditions are out of a parameter that we've set for it. It's not there to measure, the subsurface noise that's going on during that inspection process, or help us tighten up that inspection process if we do another inspection on that same equipment with those same parameters again. And there's a question about what are we really gaining if we're repeating those same things, using those same tools that we did whenever the event occurred, and trying to glean new information from that. So one of the biggest issues, I'm going to take the challenge here with the re-inspection in-house with an inline piece of equipment, and kind of break this down into equipment and people as it relates to the overall challenge of this issue. Obviously, we purchase inline equipment that's purpose built for the detection standards that we need to seek, the line speeds, the product diversity or SKU changes that we're going to see across this piece of equipment. But if we run down this table in the middle from an inline perspective, usually we're setting detection limits because it's at production speeds. Not to say that there are not inline X-rays out there that are capable of finding things smaller than this, but usually in our internal quality systems, we're evaluating things in the 1.5 to 3 millimeter range as it relates to stainless or aluminum or soda lime glass or whatever it might be. And then for things like stone or bone, or back to soda lime glass as an example as well, we're typically at 3 millimeters and greater from a detection standpoint. It's just due to production speeds. The equipment itself only has a single kVNMA that we can use from an X-ray standpoint, and imaging detection, although it's exceptional and it's come a long way, inline detection is still, has limited grayscale capabilities as it relates to finding and locating foreign objects. So from an equipment standpoint, FlexArray is using things that are more purpose built for an offline reinspection tool. We're running at slower speeds. We're able to get more photons from a kVNMA standpoint through the product. We can manipulate those two variables in order to find much smaller things. So from a metallic object down to 0.5 millimeters or even lower. And then with things like rubber, gasket, things that are virtually impossible on an inline unit, we can get down to 1.5 millimeters and above with that as well. And we're using medical grade imaging on our traditional two-dimensional X-ray. This slide doesn't have a lot of information as it relates to our CT scanning technology, but the great thing about CT scanning technology is it takes all the interference of product depth and removes that. We can strip back the layers of product and reconstruct an image at a single 0.5 millimeter layer on 3 different axes, X, Y, and Z axes planes of the product itself, and then conduct an inspection on all of those planes using an algorithm that's capable of finding things at speeds up to 20 feet per minute for us, which is a marked improvement over our speeds. But just with that amount of data, it's not necessarily conducive to overall inline production speeds. And so that's how we're continuing to adapt and grow our technology for inspection whenever incidents do occur as well. So next, let's talk about people just a little bit as well. So from my previous life, there was nothing quite as fun as running a rework or a reinspection crew on a weekend from an overtime perspective and trying to keep everybody in line. And it's no fault of the people that work for us. They do a fantastic job. It's just not the thing that we're conducive to training them on the right way. It's hard to give them the right tools for the job to understand how an X-ray works. How do we set this thing up? How do we challenge it the right way? How do we get better inspection out of it so that we can get better data from that reinspection to make good hold release decisions? So from a third party perspective, all of our teams are trained on a daily basis how to dial in, how to calibrate, how to manipulate KV and MA in order to optimize image qualities to find a host of foreign objects in a broad range of product types. And of course, with the advent of CT technology, as we rolled that out over the course of the last few months, we've also improved and built our own in-house imaging engineering teams as well that can support manipulating those recipes and building out and using the algorithms that are available to us with that technology to their fullest as well.
All right, so as we start to to wrap this thing up and get to the Q&A section here of this, let's talk about some of the key points. What we're seeing is and you guys see it as well. It's not just us at FlexRay, but despite your continued investment in what's going on from technology solutions and in terms of inline X-rays and different types of tools, foreign material does still remain a challenge in the marketplace. As I mentioned earlier, depending on the year, it typically sits around 3 behind microbiological and allergen concerns in terms of product recalls in the marketplace. So we know it's something that you guys live with every day. It's something you're having to deal with, and that's what we're here for, is to try to help you get through those episodes or challenges when they occur. We do know that what you're getting into your process, if you're making further processed products or prepared foods, greatly relies on the quality of the input that you're getting from your supplier. And we got to make sure that that what you're getting in, or you have to work through processes to make sure that what you're adding to your process meets the specifications that you're looking for. And then we also talked a little bit about equipment, and equipment posing the challenges that you may see in terms of introducing foreign materials into the product. We know that when you start to look at what's going on from from an equipment standpoint, from a sanitation or from a preventive maintenance standpoint. There's opportunities there to look at the components that might be in your process, to verify that those components are actually X-ray detectable or metal detectable, whatever it may be. Whether, and again, whether it's using an inline X-ray or whether it's using third-party X-ray to determine that, because if you've got some type of, let's just say a rubber gasket, that's made from a material that's low enough density that when it does eventually break and crack, because it happens, um, that it gets into the product and it's not X-ray detectable. Now you've got a bigger challenge because you're really not able to go through a true mitigation process to identify how much of a lot of product might have been impacted because you just can't detect it. But if it is a component, rubber gasket that can be, found via X-ray, now you're in a situation where you can, help recover, the product that's not impacted and only throw out the bad stuff. So those are the kind of things to think about as you evaluate and look at your ongoing programs. And that leads into the next final bullet point there around increased scrutiny. And in that increased scrutiny, we talked about it a little bit earlier, is how do you look at suppliers and validate that those suppliers you aren't introducing problems into the system, and the materials is what we just talked about. You're looking at the root causes as to what's going on and what's actually causing the process, but not just finding the root cause, but then addressing the root cause. And how do you address the root cause? And that's using the data that you've got either internally or externally from someone where you're evaluating the process and system to help you go through and salvage more products. Again, these sound simple, and on the surface maybe they are, but the implementation of these is really all about what's going on within the facility, what's going on within the food safety program, and how these are built into the program versus being reactive and putting them into a program or addressing them after the fact. It's all about the upfront prevention and getting these things built in from a proactive standpoint. Go ahead, Casey. I was going to say this is where we can get into the benchmark and look at the QR code, but you go ahead and take this one.
Well, actually, the first question I was going to ask you was about this report, so I think it'll work perfectly. Thank you, Kurt and Kai. So you talked a little bit about this report, folks. You can access this via the QR code, and I think this will probably share it in our on-demand email afterwards as well. Can you talk a little bit more about how you gathered the data that went into this report? And when I say that, I'm really I'm interested in more than just this, but one of the things I want to dive into is what all industries did you pull from? Like, is this all food? Is it predominantly meat and poultry? Like, interested in a little bit more information about where the
Okay.
data comes from.
Yeah, I can give you some very high level information on that. So we work with the entire food industry across the board. Now, protein is obviously the largest part of our business and a significant part of what we do. But the survey went out to a really large database across all different types of foods, and we got a wide range of responses that came in from meat companies, CPG companies, packaged and processed foods. So it was a wide ranging group of respondents, but it was a pretty large database. It included our customer database as well as another database that we've got in terms of prospects that are within the system. We got over 160 responses that came in. And when you dig into the report here via the QR code, you'll see that the full report really starts to split it out across industries for more data and for more information there. So as you dig into that, you'll be able to see kind of where the respondents were.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful because I think sometimes it's easy to get bogged down in how big of an issue foreign material is for the meat and poultry industry specifically, but it is a broader food industry problem. We're not wholly unique in that. Can you speak a little bit to, you talked about kind of these uh, supplier approval program aspects and how you can kind of use like a third party to help inspect, some of your inputs to hold suppliers to their standards. Can you kind of walk through what that looks like, what you've seen, like what a typical frequency might be? How do people make those decisions that that's something that they want to start incorporating?
Yeah, I can speak a bit to the design of it, and then Kyle, I'll let you speak a little bit as coming, being in the manufacturing industry a bit more as to how you might address it. But typically, the way we've seen these kind of programs built, and again, they're in place now, for food safety programs, but they're typically right now built around microbiological, chemical, allergen concerns, around specifications specific to that. So it's not something that's uncommon in the industry, but what is a bit uncommon is we don't see a lot of folks incorporating foreign material monitoring into those programs. What we've seen in some of the work that we've done is folks will typically look at suppliers on a kind of a tiered basis. And you got those high volume, we'll call them high risk suppliers, and i.e., suppliers that maybe you've had challenges with in the past. And then you've got the lower volume, high risk suppliers. Again, while the volume's not as much, but it's maybe somebody that you've had challenges with in the past. And then you got the low volume, high risk. And it's all about what is the requirement and how much do you want to monitor? Because I think you can look at it differently. The obviously your high risk, high volume suppliers, you're probably going to look at a bit more frequently than you are your low volume, low risk suppliers. But the key there is how often do we put it in place, and we'll have to talk through that because I think it does vary depending on the industry and the product type. But the real challenge that we have to look at when we're looking at it from a foreign material standpoint is because you're not just taking a sample in time like you would for microbiological or chemical analyses. You're really looking at either multiple pallets or a truckload of product in time to do some type of evaluation to determine where the challenges are. And then it really, from there, it comes down to how do you manage and bracket the product that is around that's being evaluated, because the last thing you want to do is to be evaluating product and then actual production that's going on around that gets out into commerce. So Kai, maybe you can speak to how we might look at that.
Yeah, I think that the initial lens that you're talking about there is just based on risk or percentage of that ingredient potentially as it relates to what you're manufacturing being the key criteria. I think that as we start to take a look at the lens that we've traditionally, viewed, something as simple as a certificate of analysis or something as it relates to, pathogen testing or microbiological testing or allergen testing, things like that, we're not as robust yet around foreign material. We have specifications that we manage towards, but we're not necessarily checking our suppliers in a robust way to ensure that are your systems working like they're supposed to? Are you detecting the things that you say that you can detect? Are you using, the types of plastics in your facility that are detectable if you do have an event? If you do have an event, are we communicating that, across a broad range of downstream customers, to ensure that everybody understands it can prepare for potential impact? And I think that as we continue to approach this as it relates to supplier quality management on the physical hazard side, that those are the lenses that some of the folks that we're starting to partner with are seeking to try to challenge that.
Casey, one of the things that we've seen kind of you kind of be a leader in this approach, which is it's kind of leading into larger supplier management, is more of when someone is identifying or bringing a new supplier and or bringing a new co-packer into their environment, is looking at it as part of their due diligence of that new supplier and new co-packer, doing some work up front around foreign material inspection just to make sure that as part of the due diligence, there's not something that's there that maybe neither the supplier nor the company that's looking to buy the product knows it's there. So it's just a way of digging into that from a due diligence standpoint.
Interesting. So obviously a lot of what you all do is you're talking about these kind of approved supplier aspects, but you also deal with a lot of incident response essentially. Whoops, we had a foreign material incident. We're looking to a third party to help us with that. And you mentioned in in your presentation about how that has led to people kind of making changes to their internal programs, depending on kind of the information that you all are able to provide back to them and the findings. Can you give some examples, obviously without naming companies, but of kind of how you've seen people change their internal programs in response to the information you're able to provide?
Kurt, you mind if I
You
take an
Yeah, you
example
take that one
here?
first. Yeah.
So it's been a few years ago. We inspected a significant portion of product that contained a foreign material. The customer lacked a robust detection piece of equipment. They were just using traditional metal detection only as it relates to that, and they were going through an automation journey, you know, and trying to be better around deboning as well at the same time. That sometimes those hurdles lead to a little bit of a spike in an event situation. So through that transition, they transitioned over to X-ray usage as well. And we haven't seen a repeat in the size of a hold as it relates to what that customer saw previously that we needed to support them with. Now that they have good equipment in order to execute deboning and a good detection on the backside of that, when they do have events, which are much less frequently, we're helping manage them through smaller hold release incidents and providing them with better data so they can continue to refine that process.
I'm going to give a last call. Please don't forget you can submit questions through the Q&A feature. I don't see any right now, but if you have any last ones before I let Kurt and Kai loose back into the world, please get those submitted. I'll leave you with one if we don't get any additional questions, and I want to hopefully get a response from both of you. It's back in 2019. The meat industry put a really big focus on foreign material because back in 2019, that is when we saw a huge increase in the number of recalls related to foreign material. It's kind of when we hit our apex. Obviously, that resulted in FSIS focusing on it a lot, and it was not a great year for us foreign material wise, but we kind of had a wake up call, and we've put a lot of effort in. What have you seen change in the last 10 years with industry on how they're on their posture with foreign material? Kurt, you want to
Kyle,
start?
well, yeah, I'll take it. And I haven't been in the foreign material side of the world for the full 10 years, but I've been here, almost four now, and really, in the time that I've been here, you know, what we've really seen is, when we look at the customers that we deal with, and these are conversations that we have, is the use of the data and the use of the information that we're providing the customers, to look at a couple of things. And number one is, how do they just improve internal processes? And improving internal processes doesn't necessarily mean the addition of an inline piece of technology. It may, and in some cases, it has, as it's kind of what Kai was referring to earlier. But when you start to look at, what's going on, and take a look at the data that we're providing around an episodic event, you're really you're looking at that more holistically, and you're saying, okay, this is there, and even though it's there, it's not only there in 2 or 3% of the product that we think it may be. What happens to our production? What happens to our efficiencies if we're even able to reduce that by 0.5% or by 1%, and we start to reduce what's going on? And so there's this internal focus of, what do we do from a foreign material standpoint? It's similar to what I referenced earlier when you're looking at preventive maintenance programs. Looking at the components that are in your manufacturing environment. Are those components that can be found via X-ray if there's a problem? How are we training our sanitation teams around looking for some of these key things that could be problems? How are we training our employees to have a focus on foreign material challenges and opportunities for improvement, just as we are around other food safety incidents? And those are the kind of things that we're seeing, or our customers are telling us on a more routine basis.
Yeah, I think to steal a word that Kurt used there, holistic is probably key. I think that, not to paint with too broad of a brush here, but a lot of folks got so used to treating a piece of detection equipment as if it was, the same as a sieve or a screen or filter, and that whenever it did its job, that we could all sleep fine. And I think that after that wake up call that the industry as a whole received that year, I think everybody took a step back. Obviously, we compounded that with other challenges in 2020, when we had a lot of employee turnover and new things. And, combined with the wake up call and then just the dynamics of COVID, I've seen everything from better capital approaches to investments in automation, detection, training, how we utilize all of those things. I think everything across the board kind of really fell into place, and we were shaken to this response to a certain extent over that 2-year period.
It definitely has reshaped, I think, how we do a lot of things, and in a good way. Again, we always would like to avoid the wake up call in that way, but I mirror some of your thoughts, and I think there's been some really great changes in the industry. So the conversation does not have to end here. If you did not already check out the report that FlexRay put together, I highly encourage you to check that out. Some really great information. If you have further questions that we didn't get to today, please don't hesitate to reach out to us here at the Meat Institute or directly to Kurt and Kai over at FlexRay. Thank you again, Kurt and Kai, for your expertise today and for sponsoring this content. The Meat Institute has a lot more great educational content coming up, so please check out our events page. You can either direct yourself to it from our website, or you can snag this QR code right here that takes you directly to it. This is part of our kind of follow-up series to our food safety conference that we recently had. So we've got one more scheduled within this 3-part series. If hopefully you're signed up for that as well. And it's not too late to get yourself a flight to LA. October 8th through the 10th, we'll be hosting our Meat Industry Protein Pack Solutions Summit, and hope to see as many of you there as possible. Thanks again to all the participants as well for being with us today on this really important topic. And I look forward to seeing you in the future at some of our other events. Have a great day, everyone.